Well, hi. Thanks very much for clicking on the video link. My name is Natalie Armstrong-Motin with Marketing Resolution. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you're ready for Marketing Monday, where we talk about all things related to your practice development. So I've got my cup of coffee all set to go. Today, we're going to talk about how to build and create a podcast to market and promote your mediation practice. And this is a topic that was requested by one of my regular listeners. So thanks very much for that. Cheers. Good coffee. All right. So let's talk about podcasts. Today, I'm going to give you a step by step guide. I realize that for some of us, creating a podcast for ourselves is probably a little bit on the tech heavy side. So this is maybe not something that you want to pursue on your own, but I want you to have the tools necessary to create your own podcast if that's what you want to do. I will say that, we're going to go sort of from A to Z, soup to nuts. We're going to cover all of these things. And if you are like me and it just feels like it's too much, too overwhelming, but you still understand and appreciate and want to leverage the value of a podcast, then I will recommend that you do what I do for me and my clients, and that is hire a professional. Hire someone who can help you strategize your episodes, who can produce those episodes, who can edit all of those episodes, who can launch those episodes, someone who really knows that. And for our industry and for my preference, that person, that go-to person is Veronica Cravener. And you can find out all about her and her services at her website, the number two, Mediate to Achieve. Now, not only is she a great podcast producer, editor, etc., she's one of us. She's a mediator. So she understands who we are, what we do, how we do it. She understands the kind of language that we use and how to best connect with our prospective clients, our potential clients, via podcast. And so she really can help get you squared away. But I'm going to cover all of those things necessary. If you want more details, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, I'm going to suggest that Veronica is your go-to resource for all of these things. So I have an understanding of podcasts, and we're going to cover that. But if you really want in-depth assistance, something more, please contact Veronica and she'll get you all squared away. So if you're watching this episode, you probably already understand the value of a podcast. Podcasts are really popular and they're fantastic ways to have a content-rich marketing program. So taking advantage of a podcast, not only are they fun, but it's a really great way to build your mediation and arbitration practice. And one of the questions I get all the time is, well, Natalie, that doesn't make any sense. Everything we do is confidential. What would I talk about? Well, there's a lot that you can talk about that isn't about a particular case. You can talk about negotiation skills, communication skills. You can talk about bad faith. You can talk about ethics. You can talk about the process. You can talk about the problems people face and how you address those problems. You can talk about lots of different things. You do not and should never disclose anything that is confidential about past or current caseloads, not about your clients, not about the content, not about any of those things. But you can talk about books that you read and appreciate that have something to do with our industry. You could talk about YouTube videos that you've watched. You could talk about how poorly we're represented in film, theater, and television, and how those are the bad examples, and show people what we actually do. You can talk about so many things. And we're going to talk about how you create that content strategy, but podcasting and even video is really, really powerful as a practice development tool, right? So let's get started. Since we all kind of know, I think about podcasting. Podcasts I listen to them. I love them. I start my day listening to podcasts. Mine are pre-programmed. I love listening to my podcasts. I listen to them while I'm vacuuming, while I'm walking the dog, while I'm on the treadmill. Love podcasts. And they are So valuable. So let's talk about it. Oh, and by the way, Manuel Del Val is the one who requested that I do this particular topic. And he says in the chat, thank you, Manuel. You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. All right. So we're going to talk about just sort of some basic things. And I've got 11 points that I'd like to make that I've noted here in my outline. And the first is identifying your podcast theme. The second is deciding on the format that you want to choose. The next is creating your podcast brand. So that's going to be the personality of your podcast. Number 4 is choosing your podcasting equipment. That's a little bit more technical, but totally something you can do. Number 5 is getting the recording software. Again, absolutely something that you can manage. Number 6 is outlining your first episode. Easy peasy. Number 7, recording your podcast. Lots of fun to do. Next, you have to record the intro and the outro sections of your podcast so that you bookend the content that you're creating each episode with something consistent. Then there's the editing portion of your podcast. And this is where a lot of people run into a challenge. You can absolutely do this on your own if you're interested. Or again, I recommend just contact Veronica Cravener at mediate2achieve.com and let her help you with this part. If that's the bit that gets you stuck, right? Number 10 is deciding on the podcast hosting. Again, you can absolutely manage and do this on your own, or connect with Veronica and she can help you make a decision. By the way, before I go too much further, Veronica's not sponsoring this video. She's not paying me to say these nice things about her. She's a professional in our industry that I respect and that I recommend to my clients to use. So there's no benefit to me by promoting Veronica's business in this episode of Marketing Monday, just so that you know. I like her, I work with her, and I recommend her to my clients, so I'm recommending her to you as well. All right. And then a last, of course, is marketing your podcast, getting listeners. So we'll start right at the front, and that is identifying your podcast theme. And so it's important that when you start, you do kind of a stress test, for lack of a better word. And what you want to do is sit down and pen to paper or fingertips to keyboard, however you prefer. Think out in advance about 20, about 20 possible episode topics, right? Include what you want to talk about, what some points of interest might be. Are you going to interview people, or is your podcast just for educational purposes? Think about, is the average length going to be 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes, or is it going to tend more toward the 30-minute, maybe even 1 hour, depending on the topic, range of conversation, right? So think about the theme of what it is you want to talk about. You want to think about, what is not just interesting to you, but what's going to be really interesting and valuable to the people who are listening to you, right? So what's in it for them? That's what you really want to focus on. But also, what is it that you think you will be happy and satisfied talking about for the duration of the existence of your podcast? So let's say that your podcast goes 5, 10, 15 years into the future. What are you so passionate about that you will be able to be happy and satisfied talking about that topic for the duration of its existence? And that's really important because you want to stay engaged. If you're not having fun, you'll let it dwindle, and that's not good, right? So when we're talking about, so we've got the theme idea in our heads right now. We want to think about the goal of our podcast. So some of the reasons that you might want to have a podcast are that podcasts generate leads for your practice. They build authority. They build credibility. And for some of us who have really valuable podcasts in our industry, that can even be an additional source of revenue because you can monetize your podcast. That's not something that we're going to talk about today in detail, but you can monetize a podcast and have additional revenue. And then number 2, we want to think about the why. I'm always asking, what's the why behind what we're doing at the moment? And you want to ask that same question for your podcast. So what is the why behind your podcast? And you want to kind of marry the practical reason with an intrinsic purpose so that you can stay motivated. What is the message? What's the mission? What is it that you want to share with the world? What is it that you want to create, and why? What's the story behind, the motivation to create a podcast? So that's an important. And one of the next things we wanted to do in our outline is decide on a format. And again, that's maybe you're going to do interviews. You're going to interview people that are thought leaders. You're going to interview people that are, involved in your target market industry, not necessarily your industry, the industry of resolution, but your target markets industry. So are you going to interview people? Are you going to talk to people? Are you going to, engage with them directly? Or is this just going to be more of an educational series where you, like I'm doing right now, you open up the camera, you look the camera in the eye and you talk and you help people and you provide something of value or something that they can act upon, right? So think about the format that you want. And both are great. Both of those formats are great. And you can do both. You don't have to choose one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have both interviews and educational content for a podcast. But once you've got that nailed down, then we're ready to go. We want to go to the next question, which is kind of the overall length of your podcast, and it may change. So maybe when you're doing the educational portion of your podcast, that's a 10 or 15 minute podcast. And maybe the interview portion of a podcast would be 30 minutes or an hour. So it doesn't have to be, exactly tightly dialed in, but you want to have some idea in advance about the goal for your length. And that's frequently a question that I get is, well, how long do I have to talk? Well, how long do you have to talk? It's a mediator's answer. And the answer is that it depends, right? You want to, I think, primarily concentrate on creating a podcast that has really high quality content more than you really want to think about how long it is. So if you're providing really good information, and all of a sudden you hit that 8-minute mark, talk until you're finished talking about that particular topic. So if it takes you 10 minutes to cover it, talk for 10 minutes, right? And then the other question that I get is, how often should I publish a podcast? And again, that's totally up to you. But once you've sort of established a calendar of publication, then you really do need to stick to it. You don't have to go live like I am right now. You can pre-record and launch podcasts. You can schedule them to be released in future. So you could sit down over a weekend and record 5, 10, 15, 20 podcasts and then release them out over time, right? So that's important. But essentially in publication, you just want to be consistent so that if you tell your listeners that you, like I'm doing Marketing Monday, I'm here for you every Monday, 8 a.m. Pacific. So you can rely on that and your listeners will want the same from you. So whatever your publishing calendar looks like and whatever you tell them you're going to provide them, just be sure that you can absolutely back that up and that you're consistent with that. So if it's every Monday, great. Every Tuesday, every day, every week, once a month, whatever it is, be consistent with that because nobody really wants to subscribe to a podcast that they can't rely on. They don't subscribe to podcasts that are unpredictable. They want to build this trust in you. And remember, we've talked about this before. The reason people hire us, because they know us, they like us, and they trust us. And podcasting develops all of those aspects of an interpersonal business relationship. So, all right. So next on our list is creating a podcast brand. Developing your podcast brand. My lipstick got stuck for a minute. Developing your podcast brand is the branding that people will see when they have a first impression of your podcast. So your podcast brand is going to start with your name, right? And names are really powerful. Names are important. That's the first impression that people get. Your name should speak to both you and to your listener. Listeners need to know what the podcast is about right from the get-go. From just the name alone, they should be able to suss out what your podcast is all about. All right. Um, for the names, it's better to keep it to 4 words or less, if that's possible. So you want to keep it succinct. You want to keep it intriguing. You can avoid words like the and podcast. Obviously, it's a podcast, so you don't need to put podcast in the name. But you also want to take care that it's an easy name for people to spell, an easy name for people to pronounce, because podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, etc., they are search engines. So when someone goes onto those platforms and they type in the name of your podcast, you want to be sure that they can spell it. So next, find a name that you can say easily and with pleasure out loud on a really regular basis, because this is going to be on your lips for far into the future, right? So make it fun, make it clear, make it brief, make it intriguing, make it all of these things that we've talked about in other episodes and about marketing, but they all apply right here, right now, right? So clear, concise. And then, quick, you want to make sure that it's not already taken, this name that you choose for your podcast, by another podcaster or by another brand. So go on to those platforms, do a quick search, do a Google search, make sure that you're not, stealing someone else's trademarked or in otherwise use podcast name. All right. The description of a podcast is next on my list. And writing a podcast description is something that you do want to take seriously. Again, because podcast platforms are search engines, this is something that you want to really be intentional about, really be mindful about. It's the thing, the description is the thing that possible listeners read when they're trying to decide whether or not to listen to your podcast or not, right? So having a really good description is what leads them down the path to deciding to subscribe and listen to your podcast. So it is something that we want to think about carefully. And this is where a little bit of marketing finesse might come in. And I'm happy to help you with this. Veronica's quite good at it, and she can help you with this. You could, find somebody on Fiverr if you want, but this is something that you really do need to give a little extra attention to, the description. Some of the descriptions for podcasts can be limited. So I know that, for example, for Apple Podcasts, the Apple platform, they only give you 4,000 characters. Now, that is a lot of words, but you want to use them judiciously. So I'm going to recommend that you really concentrate the good stuff, the good description of your podcast in that first 400 to 600 word range. If people have to read too far, if they have to scroll down, then keep reading so that they can decide whether or not they want to engage with you in your podcast episodes. That's not good. You really want to go right up front. This is, who I am, what I do, how I do it. This is the podcast content. This is what you can expect. I publish on these days. If you're this person, this podcast is for you. And really pack that into that first 400 to 600 word zone, so that people don't have to search or study too hard about you and your podcast. You want to, like I said, you want to say if you're podcasting every Tuesday, put that in the description. If people have questions about processes, if people have questions about you, whatever it is that the content is going to be, put the answer to those questions in your podcast description. You could put in there, for example, insights, from a mediator, whatever it is, right? Put that in the description. You want to make it engaging. You want to describe what you're all about, what your practice is all about, and how those things make the life or the business of the listener better. So that's the value of your podcast. Be sure that that's in there. Next, we're going to have cover art for your podcast. Now, some platforms will help you with that. So, for example, Buzzsprout, they can help you with that cover art. But if you don't go to Buzzsprout, to launch your podcast. You can use Canva that I've talked about before. It's canva.com, canva.com, and you can create your graphic in Canva. Again, you can hire a designer to do that. You can use 99 Designs or Fiverr or any group that you want to design your podcast cover art. And the thing about designing cover art is to remember that most of us listen to a podcast on a mobile device. And so the art that you want to create as your cover art needs to be really, really clean. I mean, Zen clean, right? So that it doesn't have a ton of words, it doesn't have a ton of graphics. It needs to have your colors and your brand image on it, but it has to be pretty clean, pretty minimalistic, because it's going to come up as a little teeny tiny square on a mobile device. And it needs to be clear to middle-aged ladies like me what it is, right? So that's the cover art. Lots of different choices for that. Next, we want to talk about the equipment that you need for podcasting. Oh my goodness. The tools that you need, you don't need to have a professional studio to have a podcast. One of the questions I get is, can I do a podcast on my iPhone? Yeah, you absolutely can. Sure you can. I'd rather you not. I'd like to see you put forward something that's a little higher quality than that, but it doesn't have to be anything enormous. It doesn't require a huge investment. It doesn't require tons of research. It doesn't require an awful lot, but it does require some intentional choices be made. Most people, because they listen to podcasts using earbuds, find that the sound quality of your podcast is really important. And with that in mind, you want to choose some equipment that makes your podcast the best sound quality it can be without, going absolutely crazy and buying a ton of equipment and creating a home studio or an office studio. And so you can use microphones that are USB mics. That's what most, as you look at a podcast, most people are looking at a podcast. The big professional podcasters, the people who, do just this all day, every day and do it for a living, they have they they have other microphones that they use, XLR connected systems. But for most of us, you and I, we can use a USB microphone. So that's a microphone like mine, and it sits here in front of me, and then it has a cable and it goes directly to the USB port on my computer, and that's absolutely fine. So you can just open the recording software and it's installed. It's easy to use. There are various dynamic microphones that you can use, and these dynamic microphones, they reject background noise really well. So I think they're a great choice, and you see people that have those dynamic mics set up in front of them when they're doing a podcast. They're pretty durable. They generally don't require external power. They're used by all different kinds of people: radio announcers, broadcasters, musicians, podcasters, people who go live on Marketing Monday, right? Dynamic mics work really well. One downside to dynamic mics is their lack of sensitivity. Means that you have to be pretty close to the microphone. And so if you're going to have a video, like for a YouTube channel, and an audio file for a podcast, you have to find your equipment balance in having the microphone close enough that it picks up all the good sound, but not so close that it covers your face as you're trying to look in the camera. All right. Other kinds of microphones, there are condenser microphones, or capacitor microphones, I guess they're also called. And these microphones are really, really good for audio quality and sensitivity. They do require a 48-volt phantom power or batteries to operate, but condenser microphones are much more suited for really quiet spaces or sound treated spaces if you're creating a studio for yourself, because they're a lot more sensitive. So again, for most of us, that's a little bit over the top, but your choice entirely. And then, of course, you've probably seen video or listened to podcasts where it's obvious that someone has the over-the-head earphones on with the microphone attachment. And unlike just the earbuds, over-the-ear headphones offer a lot of noise reduction, better sound quality, and they're probably more comfortable. I don't use them because I don't find them to be attractive or comfortable. But if you're recording your podcast in a video format, and you don't mind having the headphones on, they're a great solution. And if you're opting to use a USB microphone, then interface really isn't something that you need to worry about. You just plug that right into your USB port and you're off and running. Next on our list of things that we need to think about is the recording software. And you do have to have software for recording and sound editing. All right. So the audio recording software, there's a lot of different choices, and I mean a lot of different choices. I'm right now on Restream.io, and Restream.io provides me, when I close out these files, I get the audio only file, I get the dual track audio file, which is what you're going to need for your podcast, and I get the video file. So I use Restream.io. It's easy, it's fun, it's very dynamic. I enjoy Restream.io. If you don't need the video component, though, Audacity is a great way to go. And Audacity is, first, it's free. You can use it on Mac, you can use it on PC. Audacity, it does take a little getting used to. There is a learning curve with it. There are tons of YouTube tutorials that you can watch in Audacity. The company itself provides you with some tutorials about how to use Audacity. So it's not something that you can't overcome. And again, at this point in today's Marketing Monday, I will say that if this conversation is making your head hurt, I understand. I absolutely understand. And if you're interested in doing a podcast, I would encourage you to absolutely do a podcast. But if all these things that I'm talking about are really not your native language and you're not interested in learning them, then again, just call Veronica Cravener at mediate2achieve.com and she'll get you all set up so that all you have to do, she'll buy the equipment, send it over for you. You plug it in, she'll help you plug it in, she'll help you get it all set up and all ready to go. And then you just start talking and she'll take care of the rest. So if all of these things are just, blowing your mind, I get it. I hear you. I feel you. There's a solution to that. All right. So we've got all of the pieces that we need, and now we're going to start with our episodes. And I would recommend always having an outline. You can just talk off the cuff if your podcast is super short. So if you're just doing TikTok-sized podcasts, if you're just doing the 3-minute, 4-minute, you don't have to have a full-blown outline. But if you're doing something more than those sort of fun-sized podcasts or videos, an outline really, really is helpful. And I wouldn't do it without it, especially for something that is compound complex or really in-depth. Sit down, take the time. It's a good investment. Create an outline. It's no matter how good your quality is, no matter how good your microphone is, no matter how good your camera is, no matter how good all of that equipment is, if the content isn't good, people aren't going to listen to your podcast. So you do have to have really good quality content, right, to keep subscribers and to keep things moving forward. So sound good, yes, but be worth listening to. That's in my outline. All right. I think that I'm going to recommend always using just an outline as opposed to a script. The reason is because one of the great values in having a podcast or a video channel is that we are authentically ourselves, right? This is really what I look like. This is really what I sound like. These are really my thoughts. These are really my hand gestures. This is me, and it lets people have an interaction with me, whether it's on just podcasts or just video form. This is an authentic interaction. All right. And so if you script your podcast or you script your video, you lose that natural cadence. It looks scripted, it sounds scripted. And what it does, that script, it creates a barrier between you and your listener, or a barrier between you and the viewer, depending on what kind of podcasting you do. So really just have an outline. And again, if you have a challenge with an outline, let a producer like Veronica at Mediate to Achieve, Mediate, the number 2, Achieve, mediate2achieve.com. She can help you create these outlines, again, because she is a mediator. So she understands what it is you're talking about and what it is you're trying to communicate. So let her help you, or contact me and I can help you. But you really do need to have just an outline, not a script. But a good outline, and the outline format that I use with my clients is not really complicated. One, you have to have an introduction. You need to have a welcome, welcome to the episode, and this is what we're going to talk about, right? Then you can have your interview or your educational component of your podcast, and then there should be some invitation or some call to action, so that people can reach out and connect with you, right? That's kind of the whole reason that we're doing these things. So you can say, follow me on LinkedIn, or find me on my website, connect with me, ask questions. You have ideas for future, episodes, please let me know. Comment, down below, and let me know your concerns or requests, whatever it might be. So you need to have that request for engagement, that invitation for dialogue. And then of course there's the outro. So your intro and outro are the bookends, and then you have all the good bits in the middle. The welcome, then the actual content, the interview or the educational portion, the invitation to engage, right? It's really not that technical, the outline. But again, no matter how good your outline is, no matter how good your content is, or rather your equipment is, it's content. It's all about the content. You need to have really good content. Now, let's start recording. You've got all the pieces in place. Now you're ready to start recording a podcast. And I think that this is where a lot of people sort of get stuck, because it feels a lot more complicated. All of these steps that we've taken to get here, it feels more complicated than it really truly is. It does take a little getting used to, but if you do it a few times, you will, I promise, get into a groove, and it will be a lot easier once you flatten that learning curve just a little bit. So to record your first podcast, you've got all the pieces that you need, but I'll suggest that you find a room that has minimal noise, minimal echo, right? You really want to have an environment that is conducive. So think about not just what we normally think about, which is sort of the dogs barking and kids playing, jackhammers outside the window. But think also about turning off the notifications on your computer so that you don't get those random dings and bings in the background. Think about turning off phones, cell phones, landlines, whatever you've got. Think about, all of those kinds of things. Close your windows so that you don't have the background noise of someone else's television, interfering. So you really want to create an environment that encourages a very clean recording process. Now, of course, it's not always possible. That's just the life that we live in. And if you're going live like me right now, things happen. The delivery man knocks on the door and I have to go sign for a package. Not a lot I can do about that. Someone, and of course, when he knocks on the door, the dog is going to bark. Life happens. We all understand, we all accept it. But if you can minimize it, I think you'll be a lot happier with the end result. Then second, you've got all of your equipment set up, and you want to do an equipment check. And one of the things that you want to look at first is setting a pretty conservative recording level. You don't want to record audio that's too loud. Again, most people listen to podcasts using earbuds, and we don't want to hurt them. Right? We don't want to make it uncomfortable for them to listen to us. So you want to set a pretty conservative recording level, in my estimation. You can always make it a little bit louder in the editing process, but if you record too loudly, it distorts the sound, and it's just not pleasant to listen to. And so when you think about radio announcers that you really like, they don't speak in a monotone, but they don't go super loud and super soft, right? They keep the decibel level pretty consistent. You can, raise the pitch or the tone, you can play in that way, but the recording level stays pretty consistent and pretty conservative. And you can set your input level, which is what we're talking about here, at about 20, right? You want about 20 decibels. If you've got the color meter that goes from green to yellow to red, and as you're speaking, you want to stay in the lower half of the yellow zone. So anywhere from green into that lower half of the yellow zone on that graph. Too loud just hurts people. And the way to test it, by the way, is just do a test recording and give a natural laugh, give a hearty, boisterous laugh, call out to somebody on the other side of the room, right? And you want to check and see that your voice never goes into the red. We don't want to do that. We want to avoid the red altogether. At the very high end, you might want to cross over into that higher 50 percentile of the yellow portion of your dial, but you never want to go into the red. All right. The next thing we want to think about is recording a high quality audio file, and the program that you choose, your recording program, you will be able to set all of those requirements for high quality, for high definition recordings. And each program has its own sort of wizard, setup wizard that will help you set those correctly. All right. The next thing that you want to do is be consistent with where you put your microphone and where you put your face. And it needs to be consistent so that I'm not going close to the microphone and that sort of distorts things. And then I sit back and that makes a different sound altogether. Or if I'm interviewing someone and I turn my head and I start talking to someone at an angle and my microphone remains fixed here, it lessens the quality. So you want to be sure that your microphone placement and the placement of your face to that microphone stays consistent. That will get you the best quality of sound. I apologize that I showed you on video the bad example, and probably my sound dropped out because of it. All right. Next, go ahead and make a test recording. Turn on all your lights, turn on all the cameras, turn on, everything that you've got, and go for a dry run. Go through the process and make a test recording. The first time is a little bit strange, I understand, but you want to record it and then play it back so that you can listen to the quality that you've produced in comparison to other podcasts that you listen to as as the consumer. So you want to do a little market research and make sure that you've really got things set up to the best ability that you can do it for yourself. Try listening to your recording through headphones. Step out to your car, connect to your Bluetooth, listen to your podcasts recording versus on your car stereo speakers. Turn on um, the uh, the microphone on your cell phone so that it's you can listen to it on your hands free. Listen to it on your laptop. Have your friends and kids and spouse listen to it, but really sort of run it through the paces and make sure that you've really got things set up. If you don't, tweak it until you do and continue to run those tests until you get it right. One of the comments I get all the time is, I did that, Natalie, and I can't go forward. And my answer is, why? And they say, because I hate the sound of my voice. Everybody hates the sound of their voice. You get used to it. You get acclimated to it. But if you haven't heard yourself recorded before, it's a strange sensation. But you do get used to it. It does become, very normalized very quickly. Keep going. You can do this. You'll enjoy it. I promise. When you get over that bit, it is kind of funny, but that's all right. All right. Next, as you're recording, I will suggest that from the time you hit the record button until you start talking, give yourself a silent countdown or even give an audible countdown. And so you want to leave about 20, maybe 30 seconds in advance. So hit record, take a deep breath, internally start your countdown, and then start speaking. And the same at the end. The reason is because in the editing process, we're going to want to use that 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 downtime in the front and the back for putting in the intro, putting in the outro, creating transitions, right? It also helps you calm down and you don't feel like, you're on in a track meet at the starting line, coming off the blocks, the gun goes off and you've got to just jump right in. You don't. Hit record, take a deep breath, relax. You're well prepared, you've got the right equipment, no problem. Do a little countdown. If you're using someone else to edit, you can even help them further by saying out loud 10, 9, 8, 7, and then internally start counting to yourself 2, 1, and then start talking. And then say, "Hi, this is Natalie," right? Give your intro and move on from there. The same at the end. When you're finished recording, don't just cut the sound. Don't just cut the microphone off. Give a little bit of time so that the person, if it's you, great. If it's somebody else who's editing your podcast, give them that tape space, that recorded space to play with and make transitions and insert outros, etc. So that's the recording. Now, to record the intro and the outro, these are things that you'll want to do separately. So the introduction is one file and the out is another file. So the intro is one, outro is the second. And again, open things up, hit the record button, give 30 seconds, and then record your intro, leave 30 seconds, cut the microphone, cut the feed. And then the same for the outro. Hit record, wait 30 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever your cushion is. Wait, record the outro, and then let it continue on for a few seconds, and then cut the microphone. Your intro and your outro, these are sort of the entertaining hooks, for lack of a better word, that bring your listeners in, gives them a little glimpse of what the value of your podcast is going to be. So again, this is where you describe who you are, what your podcast is about, and how people who are listening are going to benefit from having listened to your podcast. All right. An excellent podcast outro is thanking listeners for tuning in. Include your tagline if you've got a tagline. Give them something to do next. Join me for the next episode where we'll be talking about, X, Y, and Z. Give them something to do. Comment down below if you have an idea for a topic, or comment down below if you've got a question or a concern or a request, right? Engage with people so that you can really sort of develop that deeper relationship with the people listening to your podcast. And then, you know what? Before that, in your outro or even in your intro, you can ask people to leave a review. Right? You want to get 5 stars on Apple or 5 stars on Spotify. Leave a review, leave a comment, subscribe, share, follow me on social media, all of those kinds of things. That's what you want to put in your outro. All right. So now you've got the intro, you've recorded your podcast using the outline that we've talked about, and you've got your outro. Now you need to edit. And this is kind of where I think most people get a bit lost. Again, if this is where you're getting stuck, just call Veronica and she'll get you squared away. You don't have to worry about this part. So because for a lot of my clients, this is sort of the least appealing portion of this whole podcast process. So just, if that's you, take that off the menu, outsource it. You want to think about when you are editing your podcast. You want to think about stabilizing the volume. You want to think about removing gaps, the ums, the the stumbles, right? You can remove all of those in editing. You want to remove dead air. So if you've got your outline and you all of a sudden forget where you were on the outline and there's a sort of a dead zone, there's a bunch of just silence hanging there, or you've been interrupted like with a delivery man or a dog or something, you can edit all of that out on Audacity or whatever platform that you're using. But you do want to edit that out. And again, I understand if this isn't the part that is the most fun. It's not for a lot of people, but that's all right. We want to do that because if we produce a podcast that has poor audio quality, it generates what is called listener fatigue, and we really want to strive to avoid listener fatigue. Listener fatigue is when the act of listening to a podcast takes too much effort, takes too much focus, makes us tired to listen to, isn't clear. I mean, or it's negative. Anything that just creates sort of bad quality in the listener's mind creates listener fatigue, and we want to avoid that. And they could be things like maybe one thing I hear a lot of people do wrong is having their music too loud. So I put in my earbuds and I start the podcast, and immediately my ears are just blown up with music that is far too loud, right? And so I have to turn the volume down really fast. And then they start speaking, and then I have to turn the volume up again so that I can hear them speaking. And then I know that when they're finished, I've got to quick get on my volume control and turn the volume way down because their outro music is going to be too loud as well. So be mindful that your music doesn't blast people away, and then your voice is different. You want to keep all of that at the same decibel level. Another thing that we want to be careful about is making our intro too long or our outro too aggressive, right? So you want to go at a pretty steady pace, pretty evenly paced. And so 20 to 30 seconds for an intro and an outro, not too long, not too aggressive. And then, I mentioned music. And this is another question that I get a lot, is use of music, using copyrighted music, public domain music, all of these kinds of things. And to make it easy, there are a handful of places that you can go to find royalty-free music, right? Lots of different options. You can go to YouTube Audio Library. That's a good option. There is a platform called 909 Music on SoundCloud. That's a good option. You can Google the Free Music Archive. That's a great place to find royalty-free music. Another one is Epidemic Sound. Epidemic Sound is a great place to find royalty-free music. And the last one I can think of quick and easy is Soundstripe. And all of those different groups have royalty-free music that you can use, and then you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about licensing, etc. All right. Oh my goodness, we are almost finished. This is a really big episode. All right, deciding on your podcast hosting. Your podcast hosting. I think that a lot of people don't understand fully that you don't just upload your podcast in the same way you do a YouTube video, right? You don't just automatically upload your podcast to Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. You have to have a separate host for your audio files. And to do that, you have to use a podcast hosting platform. And that's going to be Buzzsprout, Buzz Sprout, Buzzsprout, or Podbean is another one. And those are the hosting agents. So you upload your audio file to them, and then that hosted audio file gets submitted to an RSS feed, and the RSS feed is standardized in a way that syndicates your content to the podcast directories. And that way you're sort of ensured that your episodes are automatically placed on directories, adding all of the necessary code, et cetera, that your listeners need to see. They'll get all the proper titles and descriptions and hear the right audio files, et cetera. So podcasting through Buzzsprout is great. You just submit your podcast to all the major directories via Buzzsprout right from the Buzzsprout dashboard. Pretty easy to do. And those primary directories are, I'm sure you're familiar with them, like Apple, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify. Anytime you listen to a podcast, think about that platform. And through Buzzsprout, you can connect and upload and then that way get your podcasts to there. So next, and the last point in today's very long Marketing Monday is now the marketing of your podcast. To do this, to launch your podcast, I always recommend that you create more than a handful of podcasts. Get them recorded, get them edited, get them up on the hosting platform, get them out on the Spotify, right? And you want to sort of have a library of podcasts established before you announce the launch of your podcast. And the reason is because if somebody goes to, for example, Spotify, and they want to listen to your podcast, and you only have one, it looks a little anemic and there's no real motivational factor for them to subscribe. But if you've got 5, 6, 10, 12, they realize that, you're sort of in it to win it, that you're serious about this, you're committed to this podcast, and they can rely on you, they can trust you for content. And then they'll subscribe and they'll start downloading your podcasts on a regular basis. And again, that creates that engagement that you're looking for. So create a library, create, a cache of those files, those podcasts, and then you want to announce your podcast. And you can do that on your directed email. If you've got directed email, off of your Squarespace site, or, Constant Contact, however you communicate with your folks, you can do that on your social media platforms. And you want to create that really pretty graphic on Canva, or however you want to create your graphic to announce your podcast and get people to go to your platform and subscribe and engage in your platform. Of course, you've got a website. You want to have a specific landing page on your website that has your videos, your podcasts, the articles that you've had published, all of those media pieces need to have a landing page, so that when people look at your website, they go, look at that, there's a podcast. Oh, look at that, there's a YouTube channel. Oh, look at that, here's a blog and articles. So you need to have a landing page for people to go find information about your podcast. And you can just sort of copy and paste over the description that we talked about at the very beginning of the hour. You can put that on this landing page on your website. Some simple marketing. It is really important. You can use a tool like repurpose.io to create little snippets of your podcast, to the little audio file, to put up on your social media channels. You can, use your LinkedIn newsletter and provide people the links in that way. But all of these things, they add up. There's a cumulative value in this, because it improves your SEO in the long run. And this is really important. So all of these little pieces, they each matter independently, but the cumulative value of doing all of them correctly really make a big difference in your SEO. All right. Now, I know that that's long. I know that this is a big marketing Monday. It's a lot of information. And again, I will encourage you, if you're interested in podcasting, definitely do it. It's a lot of fun. It's a really great way to create content and engage with prospective and potential clients. It does let them get to know us, like us, and find us trustworthy enough to, bring their cases to us as practitioners. So we definitely want to do this. And if it's simply overwhelming and hurts your brain, I get it. Just call Veronica. That's what I do. So, well, that's it for me. My name is Natalie Armstrong-Motin with Marketing Resolution. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with me today on Marketing Monday. If you've got any questions, any concerns, any requests, please put something in the comments. Let me know what it is you'd like for me to talk about next, what topics we can explore together, how I can best help you achieve your practice success. That's it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go do some good marketing. Think about a podcast and be good humans. Thanks very much.